The sea hammered Dragonstone as if it bore a grudge against the very rock, iron-gray waves grinding themselves to foam upon the black shore. Beneath its constant beating, the castle kept its stern silence, all ridges and gargoyles and looming dragons fashioned from stone that remembered fires long dead. In the small hours before dawn, the halls were colder than an unspoken truth. The wind knew every crack and seam. It came in lean and salt with the scent of kelp and thunder, riffling the rushes and stirring the flames in iron braziers so that shadows leaped like hungry court jesters upon the walls. Stannis Baratheon sat alone in his solar, a map of the realm unrolled beneath his hands as if he might anchor the kingdoms with the weight of his fingers. Candlelight traced the bouldered set of his jaw and deepened the lines bracketed around his mouth. He had been born looking grim, men said, and every year since had given him new reason for it. The bay was a blind mirror beyond the window, the moon a shard caught in the surf. He did not look up when Davos Seaworth entered, only said, "Close the door." Davos did, smoothing his weathered hands upon his tunic as if to press away the tar and salt that had worked into his pores years ago and never quite left. "Sire." Stannis angled a glance. "Sit." The chair creaked under Davos. He felt a man of common timber placed among ironwood and stone. He did not fidget. Stannis's eyes returned to the map, tracing an invisible line from King's Landing to the Arbor, then north to Riverrun and beyond to the Neck. The candles had burned low and cracked with their own small decrepitude. Davos had never seen Stannis idle. He worried at a thing until it shaped to his fit or splintered in his hands. "Ned Stark died with a truth," Stannis said, "and found the lie stronger." "I read your letters," Davos replied, "because it was safe ground and true. You sent them to every lord who would take them, and those who would not. And to the September." Stannis looked up fully now. His eyes were winter water color, cold and without reflection. "To the High Septon, fat as a goose at harvest and twice as fearful." He did not answer. "A man so in debt to Lannister gold will buy his parchment by the weight," Davos dared. "Forgive me, I never learned a court tongue. I did not call you to flatter the Seven or fret about manners." Stannis laid his palm flat at King's Landing, a deliberate press, as if feeling the pulse of a sick child through law's thin linen. "I will press there again, not with swords, with the law. The High Septon sits in judgment in the great September's court. If the faith speaks, even fools listen." Davos heard the wind at the window. "The faith is the Lannisters' lapdog, so far as I've heard in every dockside tavern between here and the Mander. A hound bites when cornered," Stannis said. "The faith answers to the realm's consciences, or what's left of them. If I bring accusations to the High Septon's court, if I take Stark's truth and set it before the Crystal Crowns, they must hear me. Even if they wish not to, even if they pretend not to, they must be seen to hear me." "It will be dangerous," Davos said. "They'll know where to find the king's enemy." Stannis's face did not alter. "I will not go in person yet, not unless it's wrung from necessity." "You will go." Davos's hand ghosted to the pouch at his neck, feeling through the cloth the hard pride of finger bones. "I am no lawyer, sire. I know the count of a cargo and the smell of an honest fishmonger. But court law. You are my honesty." Stannis's tone made that word an iron coin. "Men will hear from your mouth what they dismiss from mine. I was Robert's brother and his commander. I am known. Every man measures my words for the weight of my ambition. You carry no weight but your own. They'll play you for a simple man and choke on it." Davos swallowed. "What shall I say?" "You will request a hearing in the High Septon's court," Stannis said. "You will accuse Cersei Lannister of adultery and incest. You will accuse her of placing bastard issue upon the Iron Throne. You will ask that Joffrey Baratheon's legitimacy be examined by the faith." Davos looked at the map and saw not ink but fires, cities, a mess of banners, 1,000 sharpened wills. He had sailed 100 storms. Few felt as mad. "The High Septon is their man," he repeated softly. "Then let him be their man before the world," Stannis replied. "Let him deny me in public. Let him say the faith will not hear a lawful charge. The small folk will remember. The lords will pretend not to, then remember when it suits them. Law is a slow blade. It cuts cleanest if you let it sink to the bone. The queen will not stay her hand while blades sink, Davos warned. She's quicker with steel and easy lies. Then she will reveal herself. The realm is watching. We give them a show. I've always preferred small stages, Davos muttered, and Stannis made a sound that was almost a dry snort. On the crenellated balcony outside, a hawk cried, hauled close by the wind from its murk of night. Davos had a sudden thought of Melisandre, the red woman's unblinking eyes and the heat that rolled from her like summer noon. And your lady, the priestess, she will not approve. She serves a god she says is true. The words sat in Stannis's mouth like a bone caught between his teeth. If truth is what she wishes, let her bless a hearing. She will not shape my steps, Davos. No god shall. I am for the law. Davos bent his head. He did not dare say this new resolve was a lighting of lanterns he had thought snuffed. He did not always like the light, but he trusted it more than strange flames. I'll go then. You'll go with letters under seal, Stannis said. To the High Septon, to the Septons who sit in that court, to certain lords in the city who care what Septons think of them, to a spider in silk who cares what everyone thinks of everyone. Davos blinked. Stannis's mouth twitched minutely. Varys. Men call him Spider for a reason. I don't love dealing with Varys. I did not ask you to love it. Stannis turned to a coffer, took out a heavy iron-bound box, and placed it between them. Keys clinked. He lifted parchment, a stick of black wax, a seal with a crowned stag. This is my shield where swords cannot reach. Take it. Speak plainly. You were always best at that. Perhaps it was madness. Perhaps it was the one reasonable thing left in a world that had fallen out of its proper hinges. Davos rose, steadied himself, and bowed in the faded style of a smuggler practicing at courtly grace. I will speak. And be careful of the city, Stannis said as Davos lifted the iron-bound box. There's more teeth in its gutters than a shark's smile. The sea drank dawn and sent back a sullen light as Davos's galley cut away from Dragonstone with 3 others, their oars pulling a steady heartbeat against the swells. He stood in the stern and watched the castle dwell to the size of a thumb, and then a small black dog curled upon a rock. The sailors talked of currents and gulls, laughed, swore, made small wagers about how long the rain would wait before falling. Davos wrapped his old cloak around himself and watched the line where gray water became gray sky. Gods favor fools, he'd heard, and children. He had never counted himself among either. Yet he felt a little of each as dawn broke and the idea of law sailed with him into waters where steel had always ruled. King's Landing stank. It was the reek of too many bodies penned together, smoke and piss, fish rotting in the sun, dung both animal and man, the sweet sour breath of marshes and old blood, glazed over with the heavy perfume of noble gardens and the spice of the street of silk. At the docks, he moved among menders of nets and thinners of paint and men shouting skeds for cartage, as if he had never quit their ranks. He knew how to make himself small. He wore a brown hood, let his beard roughen his jaw, and kept the iron-bound box in the cabin of a quiet little inn that knew how to look the other way. On the second morning in the city, he went to the great September of Baelor. It rose white from the hill like a promise that had survived its first telling and believed in itself all the same. 7 crystal towers caught the light and bent it into jeweled shards that glanced along marble and softened faces. The steps came up like a pilgrimage, and as he mounted them he passed a woman with a begging bowl hugging a child, a smith with hands the color of old iron, a septa with flour on her sleeve and worry in her eyes. The city's noise thinned to a hush against cool stone. Within, candles stood in forests and the glass caught his shadow and broke it into a dozen men who walked beside him. Septon Eustace had the lips of a man who kissed books. He took Stannis's letter and Davos's rough bow with a fluttering dignity, muttered about decorum and the danger of false witness, and then went very still when he saw the royal seal. For a moment his mouth made an O and he looked like a child watching a conjurer produce chickens from between his fingers. "Lord Ser Master Seaworth," Eustace said, recovering with a speed which spoke of practice. "You propose to lay an accusation before His High Holiness and the court of the most devout?" "I propose to be heard," Davos said, and set his knuckles upon the white gleaming table because he did not know what else one did with hands in a place like this. "By right, the charges are grave. The truth is graver." Eustace swallowed. "And the content?" "Read it," Davos said. Then more gently, "Please." Eustace read. Davos watched his eyes move, watched the small shudder that passed under his skin when he came to certain phrases. The Septon recovered again, and looked up with the watery pride of a weak swimmer who finds feet upon sand. "You must understand," he murmured. "His Holiness is not fond of disturbance. The court sits on Maiden's Day and the 4th day following, and will hear lesser petitions and matters of piety. These are not lesser." "They are not," Davos agreed. Eustace folded the letter once, very precisely, as if he meant to fit it inside himself. "I will bring this to a most devout who brings things to others," he said, employing the soft, sidelong obliqueness of a man who moved among currents that never admitted their direction. "Return to me on the morrow." Davos did, and the morrow after. On the 3rd morning, a fat man in white and gold received him beneath a work of colored glass where the father raised his scales. The High Septon's flesh crowded his rings. A sheen of sweat lay upon his brow. His voice was sweet and airy as if it had grown up in a hive. "We are caretakers of souls, Master Seaworth," he crooned. "Not breakers of thrones. Souls are broken when lies are put on thrones," Davos said without flinching. "When a woman lays with her brother and crowns their get with the name of a dead king, souls catch under that weight." The High Septon's smile gave and held. "Burdened words," he murmured. "Terribly burdened." "True words," Davos replied. He placed upon the table Stannis's letter and another, smaller one written in the hand of Maester Pylus at Dragonstone, which had dutifully copied the lineage notes Ned Stark had used, the marriages and births, the hair and eye of the Baratheon line, the blunt pattern of nature that said black to black again and again, never gold. There was more. A list of Robert's bastards known and rumored, set beside the inflexible rubric of their father's coloring. The High Septon stroked his beard. "People say much when a crown weighs the air," he said, "and contrariwise keep their tongues when it presses upon them. You ask us to lift it. I ask you to hold it," Davos said, surprised by the sharpness in his voice. "Hold it to the light and see if it is gold or fool's coin." "Poetic," purred the High Septon. "The faith loves poetry. The poor love bread," Davos said. "And justice," Fat chimed when the High Septon shifted. "Whoever has sent you asks us to wage war by scripture. This is not our business." "Then what is?" Davos demanded, losing softness at last. "You bless kings. You name queens. Do you not?" The High Septon put out his hand. Davos saw it tremble when he took up the letter again. "We will consider your request in the proper course," the priest said. His gold buttons strained upon his belly. "These matters cannot be rushed." "I know ships," Davos said. "I know how to hear a current under wind. I hear fear in you." The High Septon's eyes hardened for a blink. "And I hear impertinence," he returned. "You are dismissed. Pray with your time." "Pray with yours," Davos said softly, and withdrew to where the light fell thick and green-blue through crystal, and the air smelled of candle smoke and old wax and flowers from some noble's private garden. He stood under the mother and found no comfort. Outside the Sept, King's Landing roared back at him with teeth. There were ragged men with eyes like wounds who stooped over grass searching for things to eat that did not grow in fields. Half the city hungered and the other half pretended not to see it. A baker's boy loped past with a tray of stale loaves. He was pursued by children who had forgotten what to do with laughter. Davos walked with his hood up and learned the city's mood with each breath. It was a powder cask under a cathedral. It was a tinderbox waiting for a goddess's hem. That evening a man with oil on his voice and lavender on his sleeves took the seat opposite him at a corner table in a tavern that felt comfortable with silence. "Master Seaworth," Varys murmured, smiling as if to tutor sunshine. "The city has ears, and so has the sea." "I thought you were all silk," Davos said. "And now and then I wonder where you put the bones." Varys's eyes widened a fraction. A cat caught by a kindly word. "I would have begged your grace's man to gentler metaphors, but I suppose one must accept the language of the dock for the truths of the dock." He steepled his hands. "This is a dangerous errand." "Truth is always dangerous," Davos said, "but I don't know other wares." "There are others who would offer you wares nonetheless," Varys said. "The Queen, for instance, or the Hand." Davos took a long swallow of ale and let it lay a path of warmth down his throat. "The new Hand, Lord Tyrion Lannister," Varys said. "He is clever, and that makes him lonely. Does his cleverness have any use for truth?" Varys tilted his head. "Cleverness marries truth when they think they can cheat each other." "Then I'll ask him to cheat," Davos said, "if it gets the matter heard." "The High Septon will resist," Varys murmured. "He has grown fat with the certainty that the Seven will not make demands of him that jeopardize his dinners. But look here." His plump fingers toyed with the rim of his cup. "Lords grow fat as well, and they are more afraid of fasting. Your request will be whispered in certain ears that want to be seen as clean and dutiful. I can help. No payment required, except perhaps a promise to carry a message to your king." Davos waited. "Tell Lord Stannis to keep his red woman far from the sept," Varys said. "The cobbles are wet with piety. Straw a spark, and we will have a fire none of us can quench." "I've more reason than most to keep sparks housed," Davos said. "You know my history." "Oh, indeed," Varys smiled, all dimples. "I know you better than you know your best shoe." Davos rose. "I never much liked shoes. I liked fish, and honest weather." Varys's eyes softened. "You are an honest weather, Master Seaworth. That's why men will try to sail you." Tyrion smelled of parchment, candle smoke, and a kind of bitter amusement. He sat behind a table in a solar smaller than a king's hand might expect, a quill tucked above one ear and a flagon half empty before him. He had a scar yet to be acquired. He had 1,000 that did not show. "I've had every sort of petition cross this table," he said when Davos presented Stannis's letter to him. "From jewelers offended that a necklace lay too warm upon a neck to fishmongers begging a remission of taxes because the herring think themselves birds. This is new. I begin to fear I might need a better chair." "You could sit on the truth," Davos said. "It'll test your balance." "It's been tried." Tyrion tapped the letter. "You ask the faith to try the queen, or at least the truth of her, before a court that has not bestirred itself for another cause than its own belly these 10 years. "No man is above the law," Davos said. "You're young at law," Tyrion replied. "We have many thick tomes which argue that very point and end by proving the opposite." He reached for the flagon, poured 2 cups, and pushed one across. "You ask me to allow this hearing. Or you don't ask, and I imagine you do." "I am asking," Davos said, and found himself holding a cup he had not thought to ask for. "You're called clever. Prove it." "Flattery of the worst sort." Tyrion lifted his cup. "It's precisely true, but I'll drink to it." He drank and set the cup down with a soft click. "Let us suppose I do not wish the faith to seem a puppet. Then I must allow it to twitch when someone else pulls the string." "Allow it?" Davos echoed. "Do the 7 sit in your lap?" "I prefer the lap of the matter." Tyrion eyed him without malice. "Here's what I think, Master Seaworth. You are here because Lord Stannis has a better chance to put his truth in the mouths of Septons than a sword in the belly of this city. You are here because he believes an honest man can shame the faith into looking at a thing it would rather not. You are here because he is right." "Then grant the hearing," Davos said. "I will not forbid it," Tyrion said after only a heartbeat. "I will even encourage it, discreetly, if I can force our sister to defend herself with words rather than blades. I will count it as a rare charity to the realm." His smile was quick and wicked as a blade light catching a raindrop, and a rare vexation to her. Davos did not smile back. "She kills to keep secrets," he said. "There are children in this city with more of King Robert's face than sits upon the throne. Tell your gold cloaks to keep to their duties and not turn hound." Tyrion's face, for a moment, went still as a pond with a stone under it. "You speak as if from experience." "I speak as a man who has walked the alleys," Davos said. "A girl baby is already dead. A little one, Bara. I saw the blanket her mother kept, and I saw where it lay with no child in it. There are others. I know of a boy apprenticed to a master armorer," Tyrion said, and his voice had an old tiredness not years old. "I know that my sister is an iron with one heat, and that it glows green." "That boy needs warning," Davos said. "Yoren of the Night's Watch woke me before cockcrow with the same plea," Tyrion said dryly. "The boy is no longer where the queen can find him." He paused. "You did not find all this in the Sept's shadow, Master Seaworth. You take risks." "I've risked for less," Davos said. "Then drink for more," Tyrion said, and raised his cup. "I shall send a note to the High Septon that suggests the crown is a great friend to piety and has no fear of hearing the truth. At the same time, I shall remind him of certain indulgences he has enjoyed which might profit from a season of modesty. We will have your hearing." Davos bowed from the waist as simple as any dockman and felt the last misgiving fall away like a clinging bit of weed. Cersei received the news like a sword receives whetstone. It abraded her and sharpened her and taught her to sing under pressure. She listened to Pycelle stammer through his report, then to Ser Boros and Ser Meryn offer quelling grunts as if they were men and not meat in iron. Her chambers were sweet with the scent of oranges and spiced wine. The windows looked upon gardens that pretended the city was not there. She stood with a cup in her hand she did not drink from, because she preferred her thirst to the taste of anyone else's idea. "They mean to shame me," she said, and smiled without mirth. "They mean to dress treason in a Septon's robe and call it prayer." "My lady, your grace," Pycelle wheezed. "I venture, perhaps a word with His Holiness." "His Holiness is a child who found his way into the pantry," Cersei said. "He eats because we stocked the shelves. He eats because the Father has blessed him with a robust constitution," Pycelle said with a wobbling attempt at humor that died between them like a moth in a candle. "And we must respect we must crush the arm that threatens us," Cersei said, "and feed the mouth that praises. Ser Boros, Ser Meryn. I want men on the steps of the Great September who remember that their queen is a lioness and that holy men bleed when cut." Boros Blunt's chin doubled, then tripled, as he bobbed his assent. Meryn Trant's mouth made a slow slit of agreement. Neither man frightened Cersei, and that was a different worry altogether. "There are bastards in the city," she added. "Things with my husband's shape in their faces. They are a kind of sickness. They spread rumor by existing. Quiet them." "Your grace," Pycelle murmured. "All false horror and hidden pleasure. Perhaps simply relocate." "You will simply do as you are told," Cersei said without turning. "A whore's whelp is not so complicated a thing. Men have been ending such mistakes since men began." Her cup remained full. She did not drink it. She set it down and stared at the thin slice of sky. It looked fragile enough to break if she breathed too hard. When she turned, her face was beautiful in the bright way swords are. "And where is my brother?" "The Hand," Pycelle squeaked. "I believe he is with the Alchemists' Guild, your grace." "Playing with wildfire," Cersei said, and laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. How like him! The day the court sat to hear Davos Seaworth lay his accusation. The city woke in a fever. The bells rang as ever, but their sound had a trembling to it. Men who had not lately set foot in a sept remembered they had sins, and women who had never seen a prince except upon a coin whispered that today they might put their eyes upon one and count his fingers. Davos stood beneath the shadow of marble saints and looked at people like water, rushing and swelling and seeking a low place to pour itself. The High Septon came forth in layered splendor, gold and white, candles trembling in priestly hands before him. Septons of lesser rank took their places below the crystal. The father's statue looked as if he disapproved of his own sculptor. Davos's voice did not shake when he spoke. He told them his name and the name of his king and the place he came from, where the sea and stone taught lessons without books. He repeated the words of his letters without embroidery, and then he set upon the table the copied pages from the Book of Lineages, the ink crisp and uncompromising. He spoke of hair like coal, eyes like smoke, of the stubborn ways that seed worked in men as in horses. He said the word incest once and let it lie between them like a snake. Septon Eustace read aloud from the copy as if he feared the sounds might break him. Davos looked at the High Septon and saw sweat gather along his crown as he listened, saw lips moving in silent prayers or in the counting of the cost. The sept was full to breaking. The light lay in colored pools on faces upturned and made them look baptized and strange. "Do you present witnesses?" asked a Septon with a pinched mouth. "I present a city," Davos wanted to say and did not. "I present a letter from Lord Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, who died for these words. I present a book that does not care for thrones. I present testimony that the Queen's brother keeps her bed as a husband does." "From whom?" The pinched mouth tightened to a blade. "From those who have eyes," Davos said, not trusting the names of broken men to survive this room. "From a man whose head no longer sits upon his shoulders and whose honor does not require his name be dragged about to make him bleed some new." "A pity," the Septon said, and Davos felt the ground tilt beneath his feet. He saw faces turn. He saw whispers pack themselves into tighter and tighter knots. The High Septon lifted a thick hand. "The faith is not a court of gossip," he said ponderously. "We will take this matter under solemn consideration." But the doors in the rear opened and clanged shut against the hush. Tyrion Lannister walked in with a short stride, the sort that said, "I have been small among men and will not be diminished by a room." He bowed to the father and the mother, nodded to the stranger as if to an old acquaintance, and took a place among the crown's sworn witnesses without asking leave. "Continue," he said cheerfully. "I love a good sermon." The High Septon's mouth opened and made a shape with no sound. Davos hid a prayer in his breath. A boy with the bloom of a peach and the eyes of a wolf snare came in behind Tyrion. Joffrey Baratheon wore black and gold and a scowl that made him look for a moment like a child who had lost his way among adult tempers. "Your Grace," the High Septon said, recovering with the speed of a man who had practiced for shock. "We, did not." "The crown is not afraid of words," Joffrey said sharply. His eyes flashed up and down Davos as if to count lice. "So speak them, and watch your tongue when you say, 'Queen, in this place.'" There was a ripple through the crowd like wind on wheat. Davos braced without knowing for what. He had not thought to see Joffrey here. He had thought to see his shadow in other people's faces and hear him tempering the room through fear. The prince, no, the king, was younger than fear made him in the alleys. All the worse, Davos thought, and all the more dangerous. His Holiness was saying, one of the Septons murmured, that the faith is not a court for baseless accusations. "Good," Tyrion said brightly. "Then let us ask whether the accusations have bases or only hats and tunics." The hearing turned then, not sharp, but relentless, like a ship's slow tack. Tyrion questioned with the smiling patience of a man pulling rope hand over hand while standing still. How long had the Queen and her brother been alone of nights? How often had guards been posted under pain of dismissal? Why had a certain tower room remained barred to maidservants during high summer when the heat would have left fewer layers of blessing? Which chamberlain had ordered the linen burned from the Queen's bedchamber thrice in a week? Unnamed stains dismissed as women's matters by men who did not wish to commit rank to words. Tyrion asked gently as a barber's razor and left little marks that stung when air touched them. Davos produced a small tapestry with the Baratheon stag worked in black wool, a piece from Storm's End, older than both the Queen and her brother, and laid it beside a ribbon of hair cut from one of Robert's bastards who had fled the city 2 days before with a nameless boy and a hard man in a black cloak. The contrast was plain and did not require Davos to speak. Joffrey went very red. "I'll have the tongues of those who preach treason in my city," he said, loud and raw, voice cracking like a badly fired pot. "Mother!" Cersei moved forward from a side column where she had watched with a controlled fury that made marble look relaxed. Her gown fell like poured metal. She smiled with the careful sweetness of poison glazed with honey. Place a man between her and a crowd, and she could swell gentleness into a weapon. She did so now. "My son is young," she said. "He does not yet know there are convened places for slander and dung. A woman cannot walk alone in the Red Keep without men building an inn upon her footsteps and inviting others to drink in it. You will not put your stories upon me, smuggler." Davos bowed. "Your Grace, I am a knight now." Cersei's smile did not alter. "A knight who made his coin by stealing the king's duties. How apartment? The king at that time was your good husband." Davos returned, and saw a muscle jump in her jaw, felt a small terrible satisfaction. "We have heard enough," the High Septon declared, bravado filling void where certainty should have stood. "The faith will consider. The court is adjourned." It was not. The court spilled down the steps of the Great September and became the city. People wanted more than adjournment. They wanted a judgment that would put bread in their mouths and make sense of cold nights. They wanted a head to admire or despise and would settle for either. When Joffrey emerged with Cersei and the Kingsguard and a river of gold cloaks, a woman threw a crust of stale pie that struck him on the cheek. The crust broke. The boy cried out, more affronted than hurt, and ordered the guards to cut down the one who had thrown it. The city, which had long been a bruise that did not know why it ached, discovered a reason. They surged. The line of gold held and broke and held. Men shouted and then screamed. Women wept and then shrieked. The High Septon, rising in his litter, threw up both hands to bless the multitude, and the multitude took hold of his robes and dragged him down among their hunger. The crystal light that had seemed holy in the morning now looked like 1,000 shards of a broken promise scattered upon the steps. Davos saw a child with a stick hit a corpse with the rapture of someone finally getting a say. The hound carried Sansa Stark like a sack of grain over his shoulder through a knot of men who thought they would find nobility easily broken. He bared his teeth and showed his sword and did not remember mercy or care. Tyrion Lannister, small in a sea of violence, found Joffrey with his eyes and struck him hard enough to silence a scream and give instructions room. The gold cloaks rallied around humiliation as if it were a drum. They forced a path back to the Red Keep. Behind them, the High Septon's blood found a crack in the marble and taught other blood the way. That night the Sept was shuddered. The city shook itself and then lay very still, as if listening for a storm that had not yet crossed the horizon. Men lit candles to the mother and to the stranger with hands that trembled. Davos returned to the inn with his bones feeling older than morning. He slept a few hours and woke to an absence, like the space left in a room when a great piece of furniture is carried out. The High Septon was dead. By noon, the cobbles rustled with pilgrims. Ragged men and women and children who had nothing to offer but knees and songs. They came from the River Gate and the King's Gate and leached up the hill with calluses and resolve. They spoke of a man, a common Septon, who walked barefoot and would not ride when other men offered him horses, who ate from the same pot as them and refused a bed softer than the ground when noblemen offered him feather quilts, who had shut himself in the Great September and would open it to all and to any. They called him the Sparrow because he had no name they had been taught to praise. Tyrion Lannister watched this happen from a high window where banners used to make more sense. He had a cup and chose not to drink. "It appears," he remarked to no one and then to Bronn, who had made his usual insolent appearance upon any silence, "that we have traded one fat priest for masses of thin ones. That's more dangerous?" Bronn asked, lounging against a wall with his thumbs hooked in his belt as if danger were a woman he judged with lazy eyes. "Yes," Tyrion said. "Hunger can be organized. Gluttony needs only chairs." He sent for Varys. They consulted and lay rumors against each other like playing cards. Tyrion sent word to the Sept that the crown honored the faith's grief and would ensure the guilty in the riot were punished, though he had not the coin nor the stomach to punish half the city. He did not sleep that night nor the next. In the third day after the riot, news reached Davos at his in the way a tide comes back after pretending it never would. A new High Septon had been named by acclamation from the street and ratified by Septons with faces pale as wax. People knelt when he passed, though he did not love it. He carried no scepter. He wore no crowns, crystal or metal. He had gray in his hair and dirt on his hem. He did not smell of orange and spice, but of simple soap and a poor man's dinner. He sent a letter to Stannis Baratheon. Davos carried it to the quayside and looked over the water as he broke the seal. He could not have said why, except that the sea steadied him. The letter was brief and did not try for poetry. Lord of Dragonstone, bring your truth, bring yourself. The mother desires mercy for the realm, and mercy is easiest when truth walks beside it. By the Seven's peace I swear you safe conduct to and within King's Landing to place your accusation before me. Let swords be quiet while the father weighs. High Septon of the great September of Baelor, called Sparrow by the grateful poor. Davos read it 3 times. It had not grown longer. It had grown heavier. He went to Tyrion. He went to Varys. He went at last where he had always meant to go, to the docks, to a ship bound for Dragonstone with cargo that could be made into words. Stannis received the letter without a change in his face that any man but Davos could see. His hand tightened upon the parchment until it wanted to tear. He summons me to a court, Stannis said. He offers you safe conduct, Davos returned. He offers you a chance. He offers to put me before a city that would like bread and no trouble, and thinks one can be had without the other, Stannis said. He walked to the narrow slit of a window and stared at a piece of sky that looked like steel and a piece of sea that looked like the sky. If I go, I am bound. If I do not, I am a coward. You are lawful, Davos said. I am angry, Stannis said, and it was the closest thing to confession Davos had ever seen him make. I am angry with my brother for dying and leaving me this mess. I am angry with the lords who love prettiness and easy lies. I am angry that men think a king should be soft where they are hard and hard where they are soft. I am angry with gods I do not know. Davos said nothing. Stannis sighed, and it sounded like N or drawing water. I will go, he said. I will go because I must and because I believe, for all my despising, that there should be something strong in the world besides swords. I will go, and I will stand where they tell me to stand, and I will speak until they listen. He sent word to Renly Baratheon as well in the same blunt hand. The faith summons truth to judgment. Come if you dare, and let us see if your crown will shine in a holy place or melt. Renly laughed when he read it. David Florent. No, there was no David Florent. Ser Colin of Greenpools read it, and Loras Tyrell watched the letters as if beads upon a rosary he wished to snap. Saints preserve us, Renly said, and it was a joke because he did not love saints, only the lords who prayed to them. My brother has discovered piety. He has discovered an audience, Loras said dryly. He has discovered a trap, Mace Tyrell blustered, one hand upon the belly that never stopped being satisfied. We should have none of it. We should march, sweep the city free of spiders, crown you upon the Iron Throne, and send for the High Septon to bless it after. Manners count, Renly mused, stroking the well-trained head of his hound, who leaned blissfully into the caress. He could make a court look like a tapestry even when it was only a courtyard and men eating. Let him posture in a praying house. I will posture in my pavilion. The realm will decide who looks better. Yet you will go, Loras said, and it was not a question. He knew the truth that Renly hid under silk and charm like a blade stuck under pillows. Renly wanted to stand where his brother stood and look taller. He wanted to be measured and found splendid. A show, Renly said. I love a show. He went with a long train that ate up grain stores and admiration as it moved. Tyrell men in green and gold that made the sun look a sorry coin. Stormland's banners that remembered thunder. Musicians and cooks and heralds to name each noble as if worth extended in time and sounded like trumpets. The city watched them come with open mouths and sore feet and tried to decide whether to hate or love. Stannis came by ship, 5 lean galleys with sails that did not flaunt, disembarking with Dragonstone men who looked like their castle, scarred, silent, true. He entered the city on a mule the High Septon sent him. It made people laugh. Stannis did not smile. The High Septon embraced him at the steps and Stannis endured it, rigid, as if submission was a belt he could cinch and not die from wearing. He returned the mule that evening. The Great September opened its doors to a crowd that would have filled 3 cities and had 2 left over. The interior glowed with the clean light of hundreds of candles. The sparrows, folk who had traded what little they had for a share in hunger and a notion of grace, stood beside gold-braided knights like unlikely cousins. The knights of the Kingsguard shone with their white cloaks unspotted. The effect was one of freshly fallen snow that would not last the afternoon. Cersei stood with Tommen by her, golden and small, and with Joffrey between them, proud and sullen. She wore no crown and needed none. Renly wore a smile and a doublet green enough to set the mother's emerald eyes thinking of spring. Tyrion stood alone and looked tired and interested, which was his method of disquieting everyone. Davos took up a place against a pillar near the door where the poor entered. He liked to know where people came from. The High Septon spoke first and without ornament. "We are gathered because a thing larger than any one house requires us," he said. His voice was not lovely. It was serviceable. Men have put the crown upon many heads in the past. Some did well and some did not. The faith is not here to bless a head but to weigh a claim. It has been said that the current king is not lawful born of King Robert Baratheon and his queen. If true, that is sin and treason. If false, it is sin and treason to say so. He looked at Cersei. She returned the look as if she were measuring a dressmaker for a meal. "Your Grace," the High Septon said, "you stand accused. Will you answer?" Cersei's smile would have made a serpent consider its options. "I will not dignify gutter words with words of my own." "Then we will hear others," the High Septon said. They had them now. The city had made them poverty and fear and pride in their work. A laundress who had scrubbed sheets and knew the difference between seed stains and women's blood, who spoke without shame because the room was filled with shame enough already. A guard who had once stood outside a door and been threatened with the loss of his post if he told a single man when the queen desired to be left alone with her brother. A handmaiden who had been dismissed for entering on the wrong movement of the moon and seeing too much. A boy with hair like coal who was now far away and only left his ribbon behind. And Lancel Lannister, speared by the High Septon's quiet notices and his own conscience, who knelt before the father and confessed in a voice that broke upon its rocks that he had given King Robert overly sweet wine at the queen's command and had gone to the queen's bed at her command, and that for both he had lived and feared as if he were already dead. Cersei's composure was a marvel. She held herself so still that men nearby searched for strings. Joffrey shook with rage so hard his gold rings clicked against each other. Renly stood as if he wanted to clap and thought better. Tywin Lannister was not there. His absence sat beside his daughter like an armored man who had laid down his visor and stared. The High Septon let the room breathe and then said, almost gently, "The faith does not decide whose head is best for a crown. We may say this. The charge that Joffrey Baratheon is not of King Robert's seed is grave and supported by testimony. The charge that Robert was murdered by treachery is yet graver, and supported by confession." He looked at Lancel without malice. "The mother offers mercy where the guilty repent. The father offers judgment where the guilty persist. The faith will place this matter before the realm with the gravity it requires." Cersei spoke. The sound of her voice reached every corner like smoke. "I claim trial by combat." Davos's heart stumbled. He had counted on law to be uglier than swords but quieter. Cersei had found a way to make it loud. The Sept murmured and then cried out in bright threads. The High Septon lifted his hand. "The faith does not refuse rights long held. But by whom?" "I am queen," Cersei said, "and the charge is treason, which has ever been answered with steel." "Trial by 7, someone breathed behind Davos, an old man's voice with wonder in it, as if he had seen a dragon stir in the mountain. The High Septon thought. You could see him do it like you could see a man lift a piece of furniture in a small room. "Trial by the 7 is holy," he said at last. 7 champions to stand for the accused. 7 to stand for the accuser. The Father will guide the blades. A ripple passed through the lords like a draught poured into many cups at once. 7. It was a lot to ask of any man's friends. Cersei's eyes flicked across the Kingsguard. They were fewer than 7 and looked less than what the tales promised. Sandor Clegane stood there with his face like a map of iron and fire, and she could count gilded sellswords who might kiss a ring for enough coin. Ser Lancel rose to his feet and tried to look brave and sickened himself. "Name your 7, the High Septon said to Stannis. Stannis's jaw clenched once. He had not asked for this, and he would not be the man to step backward. Ser Roland Storm, he said. Ser Richard Orbe. Ser Guyard Morrigen. Ser Parman Crane, if he will stand with truth rather than finery. He turned his head as if to crack his neck and said, Ser Davos Seaworth. Your knees are old boards, Davos thought, and looked down at them as if they would have an opinion. They did not. He rose into a room narrower than his body and wider than his life. I am no tourney knight, he said apologetically, stupidly, but Stannis's eyes missed nothing and judged him and found him adequate. Truth does not always ride armored, Stannis said. Truth, Cersei said, with a lift of her perfect lip, bleeds like any other whore. Renly named no one. He was not asked. But later, in a chamber sweet with the wax of good candles, he laughed and said to Loras, Is it not like my brother to make charity into peril? If he lives, they'll call it holy. If he dies, they'll call it justice. If he dies, Loras said, you will be king. His hand lay upon the hilt of a sword as if it were a confession. If he dies by such means, Renly said softly, the realm will be half in love with him and half afraid of the faith. Neither suits me. I prefer the realm as both my lover and my fool. Then make the trial go away, Loras said, with the bluntness of men who have trimmed away their scruples with practice. It is being played upon a stage where your name does not appear. Do you know how to unmake a sparrow? Renly asked. You take away his crumbs. He finds another. In the end you will starve him or teach him to fly. It said the high sparrow used to walk from village to village when pestilence came, with a kettle and a wooden spoon, and anyone could bring a handful of anything and he would make something of it and go on. The man is a story. Stories are the most dangerous kind of soldiers. Then we must bring a larger story, Loras said. Cersei did not sleep. She sat before a table placed by her window with a candle on it and watched the flame until dawn came to argue with it. He was weak, her father had said once of Robert. A man who loved the fight and not its fruits. He had been wrong. Robert had taken much and left much, and none of it showed weakness as clearly as the fact that he had died drunk, laughing, and free. They will not take my children, she told the candle. They will not. She went to the alchemist's guild with a hood and left with a promise that smelled green. Haleen the pyromancer bowed and filled a leather bladder with the carefulness of a man moving a sleeping snake. She carried it out under her cloak, breath shallow, as if her lungs might disturb it. She did not think of the wildfire storages under the city. She thought only of the great September's pillars and how they would look by light. Tyrion woke in the middle of the night with a thought like a knife between his ribs. He knew his sister too well to allow himself sleep. He sent men to the guild hall. He woke Haleen, whose eyes were ringed with smoke and devotion, and asked him what orders had been given. The answers made him pour cold water over his own head and then over Haleen's until the old man sputtered and remembered that fear can save souls. Tyrion sent more men to follow the queen and more to watch the sept from the shadows. He did not like the shape of the day to come. When the hour of the mother came and the trial was to begin, King's Landing held its breath. The steps, which had drunk the High Septon's life a few days earlier, lay washed and pious and ready to soak. Inside, the 7 were named. Ser Boros and Ser Meryn and Ser Osmond Kettleblack, hollow men in bright shells. Ser Lancel with a trembling though he bit his lip to kill it. Sandor Clegane, who came reluctantly with a half-sick look at the color of the candles. One more sellsword whose name flapped like a torn sail, and, because no one else had hands free, Tommen's wet nurse's nephew, a big man with a big cudgel whose courage had more brawn than aim. Opposing them stood Stannis's picked men like stakes in the ground. Davos stood among them like a stake that had grown out of the earth and been surprised to become wood at last. The High Septon raised his hands. Let the 7 watch, he intoned. "Let them judge." The wildfire was supposed to do its work before judgment. Cersei's men slid the bladder under the pews by the south transept and nicked it with a knife. The smell bloomed. Sandor lifted his head as if a dog catching a scent that could mean death. He had met fire in his life and it had left him its mark. "No," he said flatly, making the word a shield, and when the cell's word to his right gave him a puzzled look, Sandor backhanded him with the weight of a mailed fist and sent him sprawling into the aisle. The bladder caught without flame. It oozed. The candles took a breath. Tyrion's men burst from the shadows as if the stranger had coughed them out. Flung sand, flung wet cloths, flung themselves. Haleen himself waddled in by a side door and made a girlish keening sound and smothered a trickle with his robe, patting it like a child. The smell of char and fear filled the pride of Baelor. Cersei's eyes widened and then narrowed. Joffrey shouted, confused, then angry at being confused. The High Septon did not flinch. "The Seven watch," he said again, louder, and men forgot to run. Someone loosed a cry of, "For the faith!" and the poor surged forward to beat their palms on the polished columns, as if shaking the whole house would wake a god who had simply fallen asleep. The gold cloaks tried to keep them at the doors and failed. Davos looked at the distant smear of green where Ysand had not yet fully smothered and thought of the belly of a ship lit by a lantern in careless fingers, and felt his body move before his thoughts could finish. He ran. He flung himself down and ground the last little flame under the heel of a boot that had known worse and accepted it. Sandor bent and dragged the sellsword away by the hauberk as one might remove a burning log lest it roll into a stack of straw. Haleen collapsed upon the stone and kissed it and looked as if he might marry it. The High Septon lowered his arms. "Begin," he said, and the combat did. It was not tourneys with shield taps and pretty calls. It was men whose bodies knew what to do when death presented his hand and asked them to dance. Boros Blunt moved as if his joints were old hinges that needed oil. He did not last the length of a prayer. Meryn Trant lasted longer because he was very good at not being where he should be and putting his blade into places where men had forgotten they fattened. Lancel fought weeping and did not acquit himself poorly. Pain and shame made a sort of courage in him that surprised the room. The big man with the cudgel panicked at the sight of his own blood and had to be dragged aside. Osmond Kettleblack moved like smoke and let steel do his lying for him. And Sandor Clegane, who had always hated what fire did to men, had that day a private quarrel with it that made him terrible. He fought without joy and without honor's show and with a set to his jaw like a man in a storm hauling at a rope he had sworn would not slip from his hands. Davos stood opposite him and did not seek to meet him. He parried lesser men and kept his feet and found himself with a cut along the side that made each breath take a coin from his purse of strength and feed it to the stranger. He was no great sword, but sometimes a man stands and that is enough. When it ended, very little had changed and everything had. The faith had not had to call a god down to decide the matter. Men had done it with the only tools they ever really had. 2 of Cersei's 7 lay dead. One of Stannis's bled out quietly after having made a joke that made his friends weep. The room smelled of steel and sweat and a memory of green. The High Septon rose. "The 7 have watched," he said. "The accused has not been vindicated." Cersei demanded the right to name other champions. The High Septon refused gently. "You demanded a trial," he said. "It has been given." He did not pronounce Cersei guilty. He did not pronounce Joffrey a bastard. What he did was worse and better. He said that the faith would publish what had been seen and heard, and that those who wished to place their oaths upon the crown had better know what thing they bowed to. He declared for a fast throughout the city, that the poor might receive the bread the nobility would not eat. He declared that the faith would send delegates to every great house with copies of Lancel's confession and the affidavits gathered, each sealed with the crystal and the star. He declared that any man who moved against Stannis Baratheon while he was under the faith's protection would find himself named accursed at every altar and denied the comfort of the stranger at his death. The city split along seams that had been waiting for a finger. Some cheered because their bellies liked the sound of the word fast. Some because their hearts liked the sound of the word justice. Some hissed because they saw their reflection in the queen and knew it would not blink. Tyrion looked more tired. Renly looked amused and then, thinking, looked less so. Varys smiled as if he had been born doing nothing else, and later burned half the notes he had written that morning and wrote others that said the opposite. That night Davos lay in a room under an eave and felt the wound in his side make itself known by little pushes. He thought of his boys and of Maria's hands washing his shirt when he had come home stinking of whale and red seaweed. He thought of Stannis, who would sleep like a man at war in a room without warmth because warmth suggested something that might hold and he had always refused to be held. He thought, for one startling moment, of the mother, and whispered a dockside prayer that had never pretended to be in High Valyrian. Stannis went to the High Septon's chamber at moonrise and found him awake, sitting on a pallet with a wooden bowl of thin soup cooling at his side. The room was rude as a hermit's. Stannis looked at it and then at the man and did not let contempt show upon his face, because contempt would have been a luxury and he had none to spare. "You did not call me king," Stannis said without preface. "I called you by your name," the High Septon said. "You are Stannis Baratheon. You came when summoned. You stood when asked. You fought when you needed." "I did not fight," Stannis said, harsh as flint. "Others did, and I stood and watched. Sometimes that is the hardest fight," the old man said. "Especially for the proud." Stannis's mouth did a small hard thing. "The faith has not crowned me, nor declared that boy a bastard. The faith has declared the truth, a thing that can be shared without burning our mouths," the High Septon said. "I do not make kings. I have that power no more than you have the power to command the tide. But I will have every sept in the realm preach what was heard and seen. And I will write to Old Town to ask the High Tower to let their bells speak as well." "Words," Stannis said. "Words are stones when men choose to throw them," the High Septon said, "and shelter when men choose to build." Stannis stared at him with the expression of a man measuring timber in winter. "And the Red Woman? I do not like her god," the High Septon said simply. "I do not hate your wife for kneeling to him. I will not have her flames in my September. I had not meant to bring them," Stannis said. "I chose you over her. It took more of me than you know." He looked away. "My men re not many. My claim has not grown with every hour. If the faith's words do not make lords change their banners, my law will have been a rattling of paper." The High Septon smiled, and it was an old smile that knew hobnailed sandals and stretched winters. "There was a boy who tried to pull up a sapling with both hands and all his strength," he said. "He could not. A man came by and laughed and told him to wait until the spring thaw and it would bend easier. The boy said he would be a man by then and would not need the advice. But seasons come to us all." "You are telling me to wait," Stannis said. "I am telling you to let what you have done be done," the High Septon said. "You brought a thing men thought could not be brought before these doors. You showed them that law can speak as loudly as a sword. Now let it be repeated in smaller rooms until men cannot pretend they have not heard it." "I am not patient," Stannis said. "I had not noticed," the High Septon said dryly, and Stannis, against his will, felt his mouth twitch into something like a grimace that could have been a humor if you were generous with your definitions. Renly held council in a pavilion that could have sheltered a village. Music came as easily to it as war. He drank wine that had met kings and liked it. He said, "We cannot allow the faith to do our fighting for us. If they mark my brother saint and my sister whore, they make me a brute whichever I choose to strike. We can starve them," Mace Tyrell declared. "No bread for any man of Baelors if he stands against us." "You will starve your own people first," Olenna Redwine said, patting her lap as if it were a cat. "The poor are stubborn. They have learned the art of not dying when men like you try to make them do it. They will gnaw on your banners and spit the thread in your face." "I will not allow the sparrows to rule my city," Cersei said in her own chamber to Qyburn, who had yet to return to King's Landing. To Pycelle, who wheezed, to herself most of all, "I will cut their tongues and pin them on my walls to dry." "You need lords," Pycelle trembled. "Lords to put their names to your cause. Lords to—" "They will come," Cersei said, "when they are invited to a victory. Men love the sweet meat of a feast and prefer not to help build the hall it is served in. Lord Tywin, Pycelle began, and Cersei turned away so she would not have to kill him with her eyes. Tywin wrote letters at Harrenhal with the same efficiency he had flayed men. He did not like sparrows. He did not like fat high septons. He did not like his family being cornered by anyone who did not ride a warhorse. He liked reading that the Faith had named his grandson something soft and conditional much less. He sent men south with quiet faces and firm hands. He told Ser Adam Marbrand to watch the roads around King's Landing and to remember which men loved God more when it rained. Sansa Stark knelt in her chamber and whispered prayers that had very little to do with the words and everything to do with the shape prayer made of her fear. The hound smelled like horse and smoke and something she never wanted to name. He had set her on her feet with a gentleness she did not understand and did not want to, because understanding made harsh things harder. She thought of Jaime Lannister, whose absence was a hole, of Joffrey, whose presence was a knife, of Stannis, whose face was a cliff. She did not know what she wanted, so she said the names of gods and waited to hear which one would say her name back. Davos went to the Street of Steel and found Tobo Mott's lads hammering with the grunts that nothing but an honest labor makes. He asked after the boy with the black hair. "Gone with Yoren," the master said, leaning upon his tongs like a king upon his scepter. He looked back once. "I do not like the way boys look at the world when it is the last time." Davos nodded and left, and on the way back he bought apples with coins meant for candles and handed them to children without counting. If you were to be a fool, be a generous one. The letter from Old Town came with a gravity that put weight upon every strip of parchment that touched it. The Hightower's seal was heavy as a coin and sat upon the words like an old tree's shade. It said, politely and carefully, that the Citadel could not pronounce upon princes, but that they would remind any who asked that the laws of men grew from the soil of record and that record could be consulted by any with patience and eyes. It had a list of Baratheon marriages and births copied from the archives and footnotes like little fences. It attached the same to House Lannister with a dryness that drew blood. Ravens took to it the way wind does to ships. Carhold read its copy and said nothing but added an extra piece of wood to the fires. Dorne read it and smiled in ways that made their eyes lazy. The Eyrie used it to line a basket for eggs. Winterfell did not receive it because Winterfell had come apart like bread in a cold stream. The Iron Islands laughed and burned their own letters and put to sea. At last there came the day when the High Septon, putting both hands upon a piece of wood where candle wax clung like old snow, said the thing the city had waited to hear and feared. The Faith cannot name a bastard king. He did not say Joffrey was a bastard. He did not have to. He turned to Stannis and said, "We will not set a crown upon your head. We will not bless your banners. But if men bend knee to you now, the Father will not call them perjurers." Cersei's mouth was a red cut. Joffrey slung words like stones and hit nothing he meant to. Tyrion stood with the stillness of a man who had just realized he had been waiting for this moment since he was born and could not yet decide what to do with it. Renly shrugged, as if to say, it was a pretty pageant while it lasted, and looked to the Tyrells. The poor cheered because change is a kind of bread. Stannis walked out into Teach. Sun as if it were just weather, and Davos beside him. The air smelled of spilled wax and old tears and something like spring. Men watched him. Some lifted a hand because it was all they had. Davos felt the press of a future he could not see. "You chose words," Davos said. "You may have changed what words can do." "I chose necessity," Stannis said. "The rest belongs to men's hearts." "Is that where you'd trust it?" Davos asked, as a gull cackled at their presumption and the sea threw back its light. "No," Stannis admitted, and the corner of his mouth flickered with a dry humor as brief as a spark in rain. "But I have learned I cannot choose where a thing will live." He had chosen and the realm had been asked to answer. Now the lords would count and count again, greed and fear balancing upon cold scales. Cersei would sharpen. Tywin would move. Renly would polish his smile and see where it reflected best. The High Septon would eat soup and walk barefoot to a slum where a woman bled and lay his hand upon her forehead as if crowns had never been invented. Tyrion would draft laws out of sour wine and wit and put them in front of men like fences they pretended they had always wanted. At night, Davos walked to the docks. The sea crooned like an old nurse and the masts creaked with a sound that reminded him that would survive storms by bending. A boy with salt in his hair and hunger in his look asked if he had work. Davos said perhaps tomorrow and pressed bread into his hand. And the boy ate it without thank yous because hunger has no time for manners. Davos watched him go and thought of all the ways Law had to travel, mouth to mouth, step to step, heart to heart, and how much longer the road was than a sword's arc. In the Red Keep, Cersei held Tommen as he slept, watched his lashes lie upon his cheek like brushstrokes, thought of the shape of his skull under her palm, and knew she would kill the world before she let it take him. She whispered to him not of gods but of the people she would burn. She did not weep. She did not pray. She did not sleep after. Somewhere on the Rose Road, a company of men bearing the seven-pointed star on their breasts stopped a lord's carriage and asked the driver whether his master had declared himself. In a field near Bitterbridge, Renly's pavilion lit like dawn though night had fallen, and Loras Tyrell drew his sword and made its whisper as soft as a promise. In a squalling village between the Trident and the Blackwater, the High Septon bent his back to dig a grave for a child whose mother could not afford a priest and said the prayers without looking at a book. The realm leaned. It did not fall. It learned a new weight and kept moving. Stannis took ship again and sailed not to war but to lords who wished to look him in the eye and decide whether they could live with what they saw. Some decided they could. Some promised to and changed their minds when the taste soured. Some spat and called him usurper and whorepriest and closed their gates. He bore it all as if it were weather, and in a sense it was. On a night of thin moon and damp wind, Davos stood beside him upon the deck and said, "Sire, was it worth it?" Stannis did not answer quickly. He watched a faint rain come on, the kind that does not fall but settles, and he let it. "A sword leaves a scar you can see," he said. "A law leaves one you cannot. Men think the first is worse. They are wrong. I have put a different scar on this realm. One day they will run their fingers over it and not know my name. That will be my victory." Davos listened and remembered a boy he had been, who had not known he would be knighted, nor that he would sit one day and hear a king speak thus. He thought that was not such a bad victory for a man like Stannis Baratheon to want. Behind them, in King's Landing, Tyrion wheedled and threatened and laughed and wrote, keeping a city with a nail and a strip of hide, keeping it fed and fearful as he might, knowing that at any moment his sister would begin again to test fire with wet hands. Beside him, Sansa kept breathing. In the Sept, the High Septon polished his wooden bowl and went about the business of saving as few souls as any man can do in a day. On a road south, Renly waited until a wind came with the smell of roses before deciding what piece to put down next. The sea did what it had always done, pulled away and returned. Men built their precarious castles just beyond its reach and prayed to things that might listen. Stannis pressed the line of the coast under the weight of his palm and thought not of gods, not even of law now, but of a girl with a half-smile and a singer's courage living in a castle of the north. Because even a hard man will think of the improbable when the night has stretched itself thin and there is nothing else to trust. He closed his eyes. He saw a crown shaped like a duty and a blade that was not made of iron, and said to himself that he would carry both because no one else seemed to know how. The dawn bled as dawns do and dried. The ship turned her head to meet it. Men woke to old hungers and new ideas. In the city, bells tolled not for fat nor thin but for the hour, and candles guttered and were trimmed. The pillow of the realm rearranged its feathers, once, twice, and found a fit it would not keep for long. The seven looked down from their carved heights, impassive. Out in the world, where law had been made to speak inside stone, an honest wind rose and filled the sails.